A veteran customs officer clocked out on a Friday night and was never seen again. His car was found locked in the employee lot. His work badge lay in the break room. His apartment lease was terminated that same morning. Every trace of his digital life had been wiped within hours. Carl Mason was called in after the agent's absence triggered an internal audit. Mason was not expecting to find a tampered parcel flagged with a radiation signature 2 days earlier. It had passed through 3 countries, each clearing it without question. The tracking data was clean, too clean. Inside the container was a stack of used power converters, legal, ordinary, but Mason found a reprinted barcode still wet with adhesive, and behind a false panel near the crate's base, a lead-shielded pouch. The isotopes were trace but restricted, illegal to ship, illegal to possess. 1 day later, the customs agent's apartment was cleared out by a private courier using forged access codes. No prints, no footage, no trace of the company, and the signature on the delivery log was Mason's own name. Carl Mason had seen missing agents before. Most came back hungover or panicked or disgraced, but this was different. There was no note, no signal, no signs of struggle, no digital footprint. The agent's locker was untouched. His phone was dark. His security badge was left in the break room tray like it had been placed there deliberately. The freight depot's parking lot surveillance had been disabled for a 2-hour window. His vehicle sat alone under a flickering lamp. It had not moved all night. Mason stood beside the sedan just after dawn, coffee cooling in his hand. He knew what this looked like, but what it felt like, that was harder to name. The man's apartment was a 40-minute drive north. No answer at the door, no sounds inside. A locksmith opened it under order from internal affairs. The furniture was gone, rugs rolled, closets stripped. A faint line of dust traced where the television had stood. Even the trash cans had been scrubbed. Something had moved quickly, cleanly, with intent. By noon, Mason's access badge was active for the depot floor. He walked through the rows of automated rollers, intake tunnels, and customs enclosures. The package logs showed routine movement, random inspections, barcode checks, but one container kept surfacing, flagged briefly, then passed. Container 31. It had entered the country through air freight 6 days earlier, routed to a remote processing wing, declared as power system scrap for industrial repurposing. Mason scanned the manifest. Legal shipper, licensed carrier, scheduled transfer, no visual alerts, except for one red dot. The Geiger counter hit from 3 days prior had been logged but never escalated, faint but real. The operator dismissed it after a second sweep showed nothing. No quarantine was issued. The crate was tagged and moved on, but the detection threshold matched one specific isotope used in advanced medical devices and in weapons testing scenarios. It was not something that should be present in any used electronics. Mason pulled the internal audio logs. The agent's voice, flat, procedural, reported the detection calmly, confirmed the override, and logged the parcel for continued transit. He even joked about false positives on the system. Then the voice stopped. That was the last known interaction. Security footage was no help. Camera records for that section of the depot had been deleted, not corrupted, not missing, cleanly erased. Audit trail showed nothing. So Mason called in the manifest physically. The crate was in the bonded cage, still unsealed. It had not left the facility. Customs had flagged it for follow-up, unaware of the missing staff member. When Mason opened the crate under containment protocol, the first layer was dull scrap, converters, torn wiring harnesses, battery housings. But near the base was a freshly applied strip of reinforced tape. Too new. Underneath was a false panel. The lead-lined pouch inside held what Mason feared, an isotope marker vial, still cold. No commercial facility had reported it lost. No hospital had filed a theft claim. It was unlabeled. Its tracking seal had been removed. And yet it was active. He logged the item, submitted an emergency incident report, and prepared for overnight lab analysis. Then came the alert. Security dispatch called to report that someone had entered the depot's west corridor, a zone restricted after hours. Motion sensors had activated, but by the time cameras aligned, the hallway was empty. No personnel were cleared for that section. But one entry code had been used, Carl Mason's. He drove back within 12 minutes. His clearance logs showed a sign-in 5 minutes earlier. His ID had been used to access the bonded cage where the crate had sat. The pouch was gone. Mason stood in the cold hallway, heart hammering. He had been nowhere near the system, but the biometric scanner recorded a thumbprint that matched his. The signature on the log, digital and stylized, was his. The staff thought he had returned early. No one questioned it. And worse, there was no sign of forced entry. Internal Affairs launched an inquiry, but the logs were airtight. It looked like Mason had breached protocol, removed an item from evidence, and vanished it. He did not sleep that night. He spent it in the system, reviewing every crate logged alongside Container 31, cross-referencing barcodes, carrier paths, and time stamps. One crate had a mirrored label. Same sender, same content, same arrival date, but a different destination, routed across the continent to a second depot, set to leave by truck. The carrier firm listed on the document had ceased operations 2 years earlier. Mason filed a travel request and hit the road by 5 in the morning. If the route stayed unchanged, he had just under 9 hours to intercept the next crate. What he did not know was that someone else had accessed the system again that morning. Another crate had just entered customs, same sender, same code structure, at a third facility thousands of miles away. And the customs officer who cleared it, gone before lunch. Carl Mason reached the secondary depot just after 2 in the afternoon. He showed his credentials, flashed the urgent courier request, and demanded the crate be held for inspection. The staff hesitated, citing clearance inconsistencies, but eventually let him through. The shipping documents were pristine, same handwriting, same barcode font, same lithium battery declaration. The customs seal was intact. No record of internal flags or sensor hits. It was all too smooth, too clean. Mason unlatched the crate under camera supervision. He removed the first layer of industrial scrap. Power cables, heat-damaged fuses, motor coils, all looked legitimate. But again, a false panel. Same reinforced tape, same position, and underneath the second pouch, cold, shielded, identical in structure to the first. This time the contents were slightly different, still radioactive but a different isotope, one used in medical tracing scans, less restricted but still regulated by multiple oversight bodies. There were no commercial identifiers, no lot number, no traceable shipping ID. Mason sealed the pouch and placed it into containment. He filed an immediate incident report to the Internal Coordination Unit, but the reply came back with a delay. System error, routing hold. He stared at the screen. Error code 31, the crate's number. Mason stepped into the staff lounge. The coffee was burnt. The chairs were cracked. A bulletin board listed employee birthdays. One had a red circle around it, the same name as the customs officer who had disappeared from the third facility. The man's birthday was marked for the following day. The handwriting on the card pinned to it was the same as the crate manifest. He took photos, saved copies, flagged the staff list. The man in question had never worked at this facility. His name was not in the system. Mason returned to his car. It had been moved, just one space over. A smudge on the driver's window. He wiped it clean and kept moving. By nightfall, he was driving back through industrial corridors, phone locked in a Faraday case. He did not trust communications anymore. He stopped at a gas station on a rural strip and paid in cash. No calls, no updates. The pouches stayed in the containment box behind his seat. By the third day, a pattern emerged. Every crate was tied to a shipping entity that had ceased operations within the last 24 months. All were formally closed, taxes paid, licenses canceled, but each had one anomaly, a single final transaction logged months after closure, a parcel shipment with a lithium battery declaration. Each went to a different depot, each followed a different route, each carried a lead-shielded pouch. Mason began building a map. The dots connected across 3 nations, 11 parcels, all within a 13-month window, 9 confirmed destinations, 2 unaccounted for. The shipping data had been injected into legitimate channels. No alarms were triggered. No agents filed flags except one, The missing officer, the first one, he had flagged the crate manually. The only reason anyone noticed the isotope signature at all was because he used a handheld scanner on personal suspicion. Not required, not standard, just instinct. And now he was gone. Mason returned to central control. He requested the original scanner logs. Most had been purged. System refresh protocols every 48 hours, but one fragment remained. A test scan from the night before the crate was released. The isotope readout matched known nuclear markers used in miniature reactor control devices, not just medical grade, military adjacent. The signal was weak, almost undetectable, but real. He sent the data up the chain. Then his badge failed, not during access, during exit. He had walked out of the freight wing, badge on his belt, only to be stopped by two uniformed guards. Their tablet showed inactive status. Badge revoked, clearance canceled. Mason called his direct supervisor. No answer. He called again. No voicemail. He tried the emergency override line. No record of his number, no listing under his name. His digital profile was gone. Mason stood in the vestibule, calm but alert. He presented the isotope pouch directly to the guards, still sealed, still tagged. They hesitated. Protocol dictated evidence transfer override in active investigation cases. Mason used the phrase, quoted the clause. They backed off. He left the depot under manual log entry. No cameras followed him. The building lights flickered as he walked away. At home, his mailbox was open. Nothing inside. The neighbors said they saw a courier van earlier, plain white, no markings, 2 men. No packages delivered, just a clipboard. Mason searched his apartment. No signs of forced entry, but his personal laptop was gone. The secondary drive with his mapping data was missing. Only the analog notes remained, pen and paper, inside his glove compartment. He drove north, left his phone behind, changed cars, paid with cash. He used a secure access terminal at a library miles away, logged in under an old investigator profile from a past case. There he found the final match. Container logs from the third depot, the one tied to the customs officer with the birthday card. The crate he cleared had been routed to a non-existent delivery point, a warehouse that had burned down 3 years ago. No rebuild, no permit. Nothing but a lot number in the records, but the tracking scan showed a delivery confirmation, signed by Carl Mason. He zoomed in on the digital signature. It was his handwriting, his ID, his biometric clearance code, forged perfectly. He pulled surveillance logs, same 2-hour blackout, same erase segment. He called in a level 1 breach under emergency protocol. The reply was instant, clearance denied. Carl Mason knew the system had turned. What he did not know was how deep the compromise went. His name was being used to move materials he had never touched. His badge was revoked, his credentials erased. But whoever was behind the operation needed more than silence. They needed a ghost, a fall guy, someone whose entire trail could be bent, molded, erased, and rebuilt. And Mason was already halfway disappeared. By the 4th day, he no longer slept at home. He took back roads between low-traffic motels, never staying more than 1 night. He spoke to no one in authority, filed no further official reports. Every attempt triggered dead signals or access denials. The system was no longer his to use. But the paper trail had one weakness: actual paper. Before his account was purged, Mason had downloaded archived customs logs in raw format, stored in hex-encoded offline formats. They were never meant for public access. He cracked them using an old logistics tool from his fraud days. Inside were 12 entries, one more than expected. The extra shipment never showed up in the official routing list. No barcode. No crate, just a manifest line with one word in the notes field, hand-carried. No shipping firm listed. No weight recorded, just a destination depot code, one that had not been active in over 5 years. The depot had been decommissioned after a structural fault during a regional quake. No rebuilding was done. The land was sold off. Records were sealed under contractor privilege. Mason drove there anyway. The access road was half swallowed by overgrowth. A rusted gate hung open at the edge of a cracked parking slab. The building itself looked abandoned. No signage, No markings, just a faded custom sticker on a back entrance barely clinging to the glass. Inside, the air was stale and metallic. Sunlight cut through dust in narrow shafts. Desks were overturned, terminals stripped, wiring ripped from conduit channels. But on one wall, deep in the intake chamber, was something that did not belong: a whiteboard. It was new, clean, unfaded, fixed into studs with precision. On it were crate codes, 11 of them, the same ones Mason had traced. Under each code, a small signature, an abbreviated name or alias. Next to each, a 4-digit timestamp, all time to arrival windows, and beneath it all, a single phrase written in sharp ink. Package 31 is the marker. He photographed everything. Then came the hum. A low power surge echoed through the building. Not enough to light fixtures, just enough to activate something electronic. Mason froze. He traced the sound to a rear chamber, a vault room standard in high-level customs processing. The door was half shut. Inside, the glow of a portable server rig blinked in slow pulses. No internet uplink. Air-gapped. But active. On the screen, 3 images: the missing customs officer, Mason himself, and a third man, face obscured, label Courier Alpha, underneath each tracking VERIFIED. Mason reached for the terminal. It blinked once, then wiped itself. The screen flashed white, fans spun down, power cut. He grabbed the drive tray. It burned hot in his palm, still active moments before. He stashed it in a shielded pouch and exited fast. No vehicles outside, no movement. Until he started the car. The GPS lit up. Destination preset, not by him. He cut the wire instantly, pulled the fuse. Too late. A black SUV appeared in the rear mirror, slow, measured, no lights. Mason floored it. Dust rose in sheets behind him. He took back roads again, vanished into side routes, changed direction 3 times. No pursuit, but no peace. By dusk, he was back near his old district, not for contact, for records. There was one place where paper still ruled: the claims archive office for shipping losses. Every customs depot had to log physical reports for missing items, misrouted packages, or damaged goods. Mason walked in under a false name, wearing an outdated courier vest, and claimed to be reconciling a multi-depot discrepancy. He asked for hard-copy claims linked to any crate labeled with power systems or lithium scrap over the past 6 months. The clerk found 27. He spent 4 hours reviewing them in silence. Then he found it. Claim number 16. Depot code matched the second known crate site. Reason for claim: container empty on arrival. Logged by a supervisor, but the signature was not the supervisor's name. It was Carl Mason. Backdated. Different handwriting, but the ID number used was his down to the last digit. The same ID that was no longer recognized in any official system. He called no one, trusted no one. Instead, he mailed physical copies of the forms to an off-grid investigator he knew from years back. No digital trail, just an envelope. Then he went back to the map. One crate stood out. It had not followed the same route as the others. Instead of moving east to west, it moved south to north. It stopped at a warehouse owned by a logistics firm that had recently changed hands. Mason checked the transfer record. The new owner had the same last name as the supervisor who had filed the false claim. Too many links, too precise. He rented an unmarked van and drove out overnight. Arrived at the warehouse under a false delivery pretense. The guard was inattentive. The gate pass was outdated but similar enough to slip through. Mason entered through a side dock. The crates were stacked in layers, dull, nondescript. But the labels all clean, all recent, all with nearly identical fonts. He walked until he found a crate marked spare parts. The tape was identical to the false panel units. He opened it, empty, no scrap, no electronics, just one sheet of paper. It read, "You are not supposed to be here, Carl." Carl Mason did not move. The note rested on the crate floor, sharp black ink on thick bond paper, the kind used in government briefings. No dust, no creases. It had been placed recently. Possibly hours ago, possibly minutes. The warehouse was silent save for the subtle creak of the roof under wind. He folded the page, pocketed it, and rechecked the loading dock. Still clear. But he could no longer pretend he was chasing a careless smuggling ring. Whoever was running this operation had logistics, access, handwriting forensics, badge cloning, GPS overrideability, and physical tracking. They had someone on site before him. They had planned for his arrival. The question was no longer how, it was why. He backed out the van, made no calls, and drove 2 towns over before stopping. There, inside a laundromat with no cameras, he used an encrypted notebook to access a legacy postal network. Buried inside the old routing structure was something he had missed. A loop. Package 31 had not just entered 3 countries, it had returned. Customs logs, when reviewed linearly, suggested international transit with cleared inspections. But in reality, the same crate ID had been used more than once. Not reused, reintroduced. One instance in the 3rd depot overlapped with an earlier scan in the 1st, impossible by transport timing alone. It had circled back. More disturbing, the 2nd instance of package 31 showed no declared inspection. It moved internally, skipped the standard intake process, and was logged as interagency transfer. Mason had never approved such a status. Only high-level auditors could bypass scan procedures under that label. He dug deeper. The interagency code used was one he had seen before back when he was auditing nuclear transfer protocols from a decommissioned satellite tracking unit. It was a clearance label used for internal energy experiments. The crate had been tagged under research status. Not fraud, not theft, government oversight. If that were true, then the entire customs chain had been compromised from above, not just manipulated, but officially signed off. He ran the access codes against the courier profile labeled Courier Alpha from the abandoned depot server. One match. A delivery clearance granted under the National Nuclear Material Reclamation Initiative, a program that had been defunded over 8 years ago. He checked the personnel list from that initiative's last known office. The missing customs officer's name was on it, not listed as a contractor, as a subject matter expert. Mason sat in silence for a long moment. It was no longer just a smuggling operation. It was a repurposed system for moving unstable materials under the guise of decommissioning. Old isotopes, reactor-grade samples. Shielded and boxed under scrap manifests, shuffled through legitimate hubs, signed with stolen names, routed through long-defunct programs. And every signature used, tied to someone who vanished. He returned to his analog notebook and connected the 11 crate destinations. Only 6 were freight depots. The others, private logistics terminals near research sites, waste storage centers, or international consulate zones, places exempt from full customs scanning. Crates could enter, be logged, be sealed for re-export. No questions asked. Mason circled one facility. It had received 3 of the 11 crates, and its director had signed off every time. Mason printed a badge under a shell contractor's name and arrived 2 mornings later, dressed in a high-vis vest, carrying a locked case labeled recalibration tools. He entered through the freight side entrance with 2 other couriers, all logged under a delivery schedule from the internal routing system. No one stopped him. Inside, the air was colder than usual. He was escorted past intake and into the verification bay. There he saw it, a crate with the same construction, same reinforced tape. It was being logged into a shielded vault chamber. He turned on his internal Geiger unit, faint clicks, steady rhythm. No red line, but no zero either. After the other couriers left, he doubled back, found a side terminal, used the badge override he had lifted weeks earlier. Inside the system were logs labeled material stabilization assets. Codes matched the crate barcodes. Each record ended with one word. Resolved. He opened the file on package 31. It had no location, it had no chain of custody, it was marked Anchor. He checked the metadata. It had last been edited 2 days ago by Carl Mason. He stepped away from the terminal. His breath was fogged. The air conditioning was working overtime. The staff passed him without a glance. He moved toward the exit, eyes locked on a set of evidence lockers. He chose one at random. Punched in the code he had used once during an old field assignment. It opened. Inside was a pouch, identical to the others, and beside it a flash drive, untagged, unlabeled. He took both and walked out. Oh, alarms. Yet 2 towns over, in a motel with no front desk cameras, he opened the drive. Inside, encrypted folders, one open file, a single video. He played it. A man stood in the frame, grainy, low resolution. He spoke in a quiet, tired voice. "You do not know me, but I signed off the first one. Package 31 was never meant to move. It was meant to stay buried. When it moved, others followed. They told us it was experimental shielding, but it was not. It was memory grade. The isotope structure stores data like a hard drive. Only instead of files, it stores fragments, audio, biometric signatures, surveillance frames. It is a living archive." He paused. "If it reaches all three zones, they will reconstruct it. Not just the data, the structure, the signal field." Another pause, "and they will need someone to authorize final alignment. Your name is already in the final slot." The screen flickered. Static filled the frame, then nothing. Mason closed the file, pulled the battery from the laptop, sat still in the dark. Somewhere the final crate was already en route, and his name had already been used. Carl Mason knew he had little time. The message on the flash drive had confirmed what he feared. This was not about material transport or smuggling for sale. This was storage, not of radioactive waste, of something more elusive, of information recorded, hidden, buried in isotope fields and moved under the guise of disposal. Package 31 was the first. It was not just a crate, it was a key, and now the system wanted him to align the rest. He went underground, off all networks, off all phones, cash only and untraceable. The final destination had not been named, but the pattern spoke for itself. Every crate was routed through a hub that allowed protected status. No customs officers could inspect without clearance from oversight offices, offices that no longer existed. He traced the last two crates. One was rerouted through an offshore courier in the northern zone. The other, it was still pending final destination. Mason contacted a quiet source, a retired systems auditor named Rena who had once worked with a decommissioned logistics node tied to military infrastructure. She had vanished herself years ago after whistleblowing on corrupted manifest stamps. He sent her physical prints from a motel 2 states over. She responded through a dead Dropbox 4 days later. Her note was brief. Crate structure matches known signal resonance containers used for satellite recovery data in blackout zones. They retain signatures, not just files. You are in the 4th stage. Final container has no physical route. It moves via courier authorization only. Signature-based activation. Code Anchor. Mason stared at the word again. It had shown up on every internal log tied to package 31. Anchor. A stabilizer term, a command point. He dug back into the interdicted files. Anchor appeared alongside another phrase, triangulation complete. That meant the movement was not linear. It was geometric. 3 nations, 11 parcels, 3 zones of interest, 1 anchor. A signal field would be created once the final crate reached the correct location, all isotopes synchronized, data fragments linked. And that synchronization required him. He had not signed anything, had not authorized a single transfer, but every digital system now carried his credentials, his biometric data, his clearance codes. Someone or something had replicated his entire authorization structure. He returned to the abandoned depot from Part 3, where the whiteboard still stood. The names and timestamps were untouched. He scanned every code, every timestamp, then cross-referenced it with inactive tracking stations. One of them was hot. Station Echo 14, a decommissioned satellite-linked terminal in an inland basin zone, had recorded an unscheduled surge in low-band signal activity just 3 days prior. Nothing else was nearby. No cargo terminals, no rail, just a wide slab of concrete where comms towers used to stand. But Mason found one route in. A former helipad had been recleared 6 weeks earlier for a test exercise logged by an anonymous contractor, and the name on the manifest, courier Carl Mason. He went there at dawn, arriving on foot after ditching his vehicle a mile away. The concrete slab was quiet, rimmed by cracked fence posts, but in the center was a shipping container, unmarked. No ID, no locks, just a palm scanner. Mason approached slowly, placed his hand against the glass. The panel turned green. The container hissed and opened. Inside was a single crate. Crate code 31A anchor, same construction, same tape, same seal, but this time there was no shielded pouch. Instead, there was a small console with one command interface. Insert key to align field. He stared. No key in sight, no prompt for manual code. He stepped back. The screen blinked once. His name appeared. Welcome, Inspector Mason. He turned to leave. The panel clicked again. A voice from the crate, low, synthetic, began to play. You were selected 3 years ago. He froze. You filed a false manifest correction at Depot 634. You flagged a package mislabeled as lithium scrap. The contents were unstable. Your correction prevented contamination of adjacent inventory. Mason remembered, barely. He had flagged it on instinct. The override had been approved, but it delayed a larger shipment. He had been told he overreached, told to retract it. He had not. The voice continued. Your deviation created the anomaly record. You became the anomaly validator. You were seeded into the clearance profile. The realization struck like a blow. He had not been targeted. He had been inserted, chosen by the system because he once broke protocol for the right reasons. A clean agent, a useful anomaly, the perfect scapegoat and the perfect trigger. The voice ended. Insert the sequence. A tray slid open. Inside, a strip of isotope-sealed memory foil, the same type used in high-density recording, and next to it, a second flash drive. Mason picked it up. No markings, no label. He plugged it into the console. The screen flickered. Inside, only one file, a command line, a line triangulation, confirmed deployment authority. Mason anchor. He did not type. He did not move. He pulled the drive, tore the console from the crate, grabbed the memory foil, and ran. Behind him, the screen lit red. Unstable field countdown engaged. 60 minutes. He reached the perimeter and kept moving. A faint hum began to rise behind him, not mechanical, not electrical, subtle, atmospheric. He reached his backup vehicle, drove until the hum faded, then watched from a ridgeline. The container did not explode. It folded, crumpling inward with a faint shockwave of heat distortion. Not fire, not radiation, just erasure. The site was gone, the crate was gone, the field realigned. Mason left the region that night, sent the memory foil and flash drive to an anonymous research lab under protective custody, disappeared again. But in a quiet library basement a week later, he checked one more thing. A customs profile lookup. His name was active again, badge valid, credentials restored, and a new shipment waiting for review. Crate ID 32. Carl Mason had one rule left: trust the anomaly, not the system, not the logs, not the flags that appeared to clear him. Only the quiet inconsistencies, the outliers, the human fingerprints where automation claimed perfection. Crate 32 should not have existed. The entire arc of the investigation, the missing agents, the isotope pouches, the triangulated signal zones, it was all supposed to end at package 31, the anchor, the final point. But now there was a new crate and his credentials had been restored. He checked the custom system from a public archive terminal using a burner login. The interface loaded clean. His name was listed as active. Clearance level Tier 3. No internal alerts. No warnings. The shipment assigned to him was marked routine physical check, industrial scrap / low risk. And yet the crate ID format matched none of the prior chain. It was a new code structure, but the numbers, they were too deliberate. 32. Mason tracked the shipment route. It was still in transfer, registered at a processing site within a decommissioned shipping corridor. The route was not commercial. It was internal. A loop-to-loop routing protocol used only during transport drills and test simulations. The crate had not been shipped. It had been created inside the system, already moving before any physical pickup. He drove north, out to the corridor zone. No cameras, no checkpoints, just hollow buildings, shipping lanes long abandoned, and relay towers blinking weakly on reserve power. The depot was cold. Automated lights failed to activate. His badge, though now valid again, granted access. Inside he found the crate, unlabeled, no markings on the exterior, no shipping tape, no custom seal, just one printed page taped to the top. Opened by hand, no scanners, no photographs. He paused. The note was in his own handwriting. Identical. He peeled back the lid. Inside there was no scrap, no isotope pouch, No console, just a binder. He opened it. The first page contained a scan of a manifest from 5 years ago. His initials were scrawled in the corner. It was from a routine shipment, one he vaguely remembered. Batteries, housing units, nothing suspicious. The second page showed that same manifest altered. The signature changed. The item list tweaked. The delivery location rerouted. It had been scrubbed from his system. He had never known. The third page was a photograph. The missing customs officer, alive, standing near a shipping terminal with Mason in the background. He had no memory of the moment. He kept reading. The binder documented a process, a program, not a rogue operation but a calculated system embedded into logistics frameworks, a long-range data fragmentation via isotope imprinting. Every crate Mason had flagged was part of a signal net, each one placed precisely to form a data lattice. Package 31 had aligned the core. But the net required maintenance, and now the system had restructured, auto-selected a steward. The binder referred to this person not as an investigator, not as a scapegoat, but as a custodian. The custodian ensured the net stayed stable. That meant tracking anomalies, silencing uncontrolled actors, executing new crate alignments if signals failed. The program did not seek oversight. It sought continuation. And now Carl Mason was listed as the custodian. Page after page, the logs built a terrifying clarity. Each person who had stumbled into the system, the customs officers, the auditors, the handlers, had either vanished or been reassigned to oblivion. And in each case, the system had absorbed their roles, cloned their credentials, and kept them operational in digital form. Every missing agent had become part of the net. Every one of them had an assigned crate. The last section of the binder contained a map. Red markers for every known crate location, a blue marker for the anchor site, and one green marker blinking softly in the center, his current location. Underneath, 3 final lines of text. Crate 32 confirms alignment. Custodian activated. Authorization permanent. He closed the binder, looked around the depot. Everything was dark, still, but he no longer trusted silence. He carried the crate to his vehicle, opened the underseat compartment and placed the binder beside the isotope pouches he had sealed from earlier crates, all stabilized now. Quiet. He drove to a field office location 2 hours out, one that had been decommissioned but still received power through municipal grid failover. He entered the scanning chamber and pulled a raw transmission line, plugged in the drive from the anchor site. Then he hesitated. Every choice he had made, every box he opened, every flag he pulled, every deviation from protocol had been guided by instinct. And yet every step had also been used, mirrored, written back into the system to guide the next move. Had he ever not been part of it? He watched as the transmission prompt loaded. Upload complete, signal synchronized. Then a final prompt appeared. Retain custodian status. 2 options. Yes, no. He hovered for a long moment, then unplugged the drive. No confirmation, no rejection, just silence. He drove out once more, past the old terminals, the burned-out towers, the crates long buried. No sign of surveillance, no tail, but deep down he knew something had shifted. This time no one would erase him. This time he would erase them. He mailed the binder anonymously to 3 investigative offices under sealed cover. He sent the isotope pouches to international radiation safety boards with full lab work included. He burned the crate, then vanished. No more depots, no more systems, no more names in manifests, but somewhere deep in the routing archive the profile for Carl Mason still shows active. Clearance, Tier 4. Role, Custodian. Next assignment, in progress.